Hello and welcome to Nonviolence International's YouTube channel. My name is Paige Wright and I am an intern at Nonviolence International, working on our Spotlight series and our other forms of media. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak with the leader of Nonviolence International Ukraine in the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, Andre Kamenshikov. Andre currently lives just outside of Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, and in this interview shares with us his informed perspective on Russia and Ukraine. Again for taking the time to speak with me and you're very and just staying by Kyiv and continuing to advocate, but also express your story and your unique experience. I was wondering if you wanted to go ahead and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your experience with Nonviolence International and the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, and just go into a bit of depth about that.
Okay, my name is Andre Kamenshikov. I'm a peace and I guess peace activist, humanitarian activist. I've been affiliated with the nonprofit organization Nonviolence International for nearly 30 years now, since 1992. And I've spent all these years working as a civil society activist in different parts of the post-Soviet states, in different countries that once were part of the USSR. I worked in different areas of conflict. I worked a lot in the Caucasus and some regions of the Caucasus, like Chechnya or Georgia. And I have lately been, for the last 6 years or 7 years, I've been based in Ukraine, and I'm trying to do whatever I can for peace and common sense and humanitarian issues here in Ukraine.
Wonderful. Could you tell me a little bit about what it's like being in Ukraine right now, especially near the capital of Kyiv?
Well, it depends, actually, from a human point of view, it depends where exactly you are, because Kyiv is a big city, large. It's divided by the Dnieper River, which is a wide river, a few islands in the middle of it. And as such, it makes a big difference what part of Kyiv you're in. 3 years ago, I lived in an area that is north of here. There's a subway line not far from where I live that goes up directly to the place where I used to live. The place where I used to live was already, at least a few days ago, it was a site where there was some street fighting, and so people obviously had to, sit home and keep their heads down, because there were some battles right on the streets of that region. In the area where I live, it's a southern suburb of Kyiv. So far, thank God, things were relatively quiet. So far, I'm lucky not to be affected like residents of some other areas of the city. But of course, these things can easily change, unfortunately, in a time of war. Some areas were in the north, some west suburbs of Kyiv were sites for very serious fighting and major battles, and houses were demolished and so forth. And it's kind of weird, looking at places where you used to visit for different purposes not so long ago, and suddenly seeing all the destruction there. So even a mile is a big distance these days, and 10 miles can be a very significant distance in terms of the way people can live. So I've been lucky so far. I don't know what's going to happen, what the next few days will bring, but so far things have been fairly quiet in my area.
Well, that's good to hear. I hope it stays that way.
I do too.
So as this war continues to escalate and acts of aggression, war continue to happen, what is your perception of this war, of this conflict? Where do you see it going from your point of view? I know right now it seems there is really no end in sight, but there are supposedly talks of peace. Where do you see this conflict going?
Well, you know, I'm not a fortune teller, but I see things going around that remind me of what I saw 27 years ago when I was half my age. I was then in the Republic of Chechnya in the Russian, which is actually part of the Russian Federation, but was a kind of self-proclaimed territory, when then the Russian government decided to put an end to this misbehavior of the Chechen leadership. And it had very valid concerns, to be honest. You know, unlike in the case with Ukraine, there was lots of criminality associated with Chechnya and so forth. But of course, they found the wrong answer. They sent in military forces, thinking that will take, you know, a couple of days and things will be over. Instead of taking a couple of days, that war took about a year and a half, turned into a bloody mess with tens of thousands of victims, the country being destroyed, and eventually with the Russian defeat. The Russian military, there was in this so-called, what was called the First Chechen War, there was a ceasefire that was basically de facto defeat of the Russian side at the time in August of 1996. There was a ceasefire signed and Russian troops pulled out. The Chechen leadership, unfortunately, was capable of winning the war, but was not capable of winning the peace. The area continued to disintegrate. There was never any effective government established. Became a home for all kinds of criminal bands, kidnapping, and lots of nasty things were happening. And eventually it became a base for attacks on neighboring areas, and that was used as a pretext to reinvade for another few years. There was another number of years of war and terrorist attacks, not only in the area, but all around Russia, including Moscow. And eventually things more or less settle down, where you have a very, very peculiar situation there. But you know, there's at least there's no war right now. I won't speak in more detail. You know, it's a separate issue, what's going on in Chechnya today. But you know, what I see now reminds me those first days of the war in Chechnya, when Russian troops were pulling in, expecting an easy victory, and ending up in a bloody mess. That's what's happening in Ukraine, except that, unlike in the case of Chechnya, Ukraine is not part of the Russian Federation. Never was. It was part of the USSR, the same as Russia. It wasn't part of Russia, even when it was part of the USSR. It is an independent country. It has a normal government. It's a democracy. It has its own military that's shown itself to be quite strong and quite effective. That's putting up a very stiff resistance. It has a population for probably half of the people of for probably half of the population, Russian is their mother tongue, the language they speak in their daily lives, maybe even more than that. Even, you know, some are considered ethnic Russians, other consider them Ukrainians, but do speak Russian as their home language, including the president. He officially, of course, speaks Ukrainian, but it's known that, you know, he's a Russian-speaking Ukrainian, as so many others. And now the country that, you know, there's this concept, there used to be this concept of the three brotherly nations of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Used to be accepted by most, but Russia always, well, not always, but, you know, wanted to see itself as, have special treatment as the older brother, you know, has the upper hand, or can, you know, kind of help his younger brothers find the proper way and so forth. They thought that they will come in, that they will be, that the majority of the population will be at least neutral, or some will even welcome this invasion. And they found the direct opposite of what they expected. They found a national war against the Russian invasion. When Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, ethnic Russians living in Ukraine, Jews living in Ukraine, representatives of all different ethnic groups living in Ukraine, see this as a foreign invasion that they have to resist by any means they have available. And this is a disaster of immense proportions, a tragedy for people of Ukraine and the people of Russia. It will take many, many decades till the wounds created by this war will start to mend. So nothing good is going to happen in the near future. If we look at the, if we try to predict what's going to happen in the next few weeks, the Ukrainian view is that at some point the Russian losses, both direct military losses and losses to the economy, losses due to very severe sanctions and international pressure, combined with a massive support, including military support to the Ukrainian side, will lead to a fact where Russia's military will not be able anymore to advance, to continue carrying out offensive operations. And that's when Russia will have to seriously start negotiating, because they, even in the territories that they claim they have under their control, they're having lots of difficulty to install, you know, install the kind of government that they would be satisfied with. Their idea, as I believe, was not to militarily occupy all of Ukraine, but was to carry out a quick military operation that would lead to a change in the Ukrainian leadership, put in charge people that are, let's say, pro-Russian in their views, and support them, and, you know, make Ukraine again a kind of satellite state, you know, with Russia. Well, you're not going to win friends by sending cruise missiles to their country. And that very simple idea apparently never entered the minds of President Putin and the people around him that were making these decisions. I have seen a number of times, at least 3 times, when political leadership of a country makes mistakes that are hard to explain from the point of view of common sense. Anyone that has some common sense and just, you don't need to be a specialist in any field, be educated in international affairs or, read, have an encyclopedia in your head, whatever. All you need to do is to have some common sense. And, ask a person from the street, is this right or not? And yet, I can recall at least 3 instances when political leaderships, the political leadership of a country made mistakes that it would be hard to understand just from the point of view of common sense. This is their 3rd time and the most tragic of them all. What's going to happen? Well, it's clear that their plan has failed. Today, they did the same thing that Russia did in 1994 when its first attempts to organize a quick operation against the Chechen Republic failed. They just sent in more troops. They started first, they were doing things in disguise, through cooperation with local opposition groups. When that failed, they just sent troops in directly. And the same thing is happening now. The responses we heard from the Minister of Defense, Russian Minister of Defense, yesterday was that this operation will last as long as it needs to last until it reaches the set objectives. And he was very unclear about what these objectives are. But what I think is that they want to gain some ground. They want to take control of some key cities and use that as a bargaining chip in negotiations. But every day works against the Russian side, both militarily and economically, and in terms of public perception. I mean public perception, not just worldwide, but in Russia itself. People are beginning to wake up because the so many factors, thousands, or I don't know what the true figure of victims is. Ukrainians speak about 6,000 Russian soldiers killed, which is probably exaggeration. Sides usually exaggerate each other's casualties, but nonetheless, I would expect that the death toll isn't in thousands already. That's on the Russian side, probably somewhere on the Ukrainian side. So we will probably see some sort of a stalemate, maybe in a few weeks, maybe before. We'll probably see some long and difficult negotiations. And that's probably the best option. The worst option is that the Kremlin leadership goes totally insane, and when it sees that things are not working as planned, starts, thinking about using weapons of mass destruction. I still think they won't go that far, but I didn't believe till recently that they will actually attempt a full-scale invasion from all sides into Ukraine and trying to take Kiev as they did. About a week ago, just a little more than a week ago, just a few days before the war, when I was asked about what would probably happen, I put forward 3 possibilities. The most likely possibility that I gave a 50% chance was a local military operation in the Donbas area in eastern Ukraine, where the war around the self-proclaimed independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk has been going on for 8 years already. and with Russian support that they would probably try to take more ground in those areas. I thought that that was the most likely possibility. Somewhat less likely was the possibility in my mind that there wouldn't be any military escalation, that maybe the Russian leadership would just recognize the de facto, the self-proclaimed independence of these areas, you know, in the limits that were already under their control. There were these two parts in eastern Ukraine that have been under separatist control for 8 years, even though, I mean, we speak separatist, formally separatist, de facto, of course, under Moscow control, yeah, but formally under separatist control. And the least likely, though not, you know, scenario that I said maybe 20%, is a full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine, attempts to take Kyiv on all sides and so on. So I thought that's possible, but I thought that's the least likely of the three options. Unfortunately, that's the option that the Russian leadership chose. So I'm not very good in predicting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective on the conflict. Through your through GPAC and Nonviolence Ukraine, you issued a statement on behalf of them talking about what you're urging in what GPAC is urging in these times for peace. And you noted that, you know, calling for humanitarian assistance for countries to provide safe haven to those who are now fleeing Ukraine and trying to stay safe, and then to hold, the other country should hold everyone involved under the international law and be able to judge them as such. I was wondering how your efforts kind of have changed now, or if what other calls you might have for peace, and what anybody who's watching this can do as an individual.
Yeah, I get these questions often, and it always, you know, when people say, what can I do as an individual? Well, I can, you know, if you would be living in Russia or Belarus, I could easily say what you can do. But of course, in other countries, it's a little more difficult. Well, I think, you know, use any opportunity to demonstrate, support Ukraine, speak against the Russian aggression, try to share information about what's going on. One thing that can be done is sharing information about nonviolent resistance, because what is happening now is that there are these two sides. There's the resistance of the Ukrainian military and self-defense units and all these groups, which are definitely fighting much stronger and much more effectively militarily than anyone expected. But behind that, you know, in the areas that Russia claims has control of, the truth is that it doesn't really have control, because in most cases you have the Ukrainian authorities still in charge and still, you know, taking care of services, you know, daily services, and you have people non-violently or without arms protesting, blocking roads, demonstrating, waving Ukrainian flags, playing the national anthem, and so forth, and confronting the Russian military on just basically on a daily basis. You see all kinds of even individual cases, you know, when people say, you know, a Ukrainian driver is driving by a Russian armored personnel carrier that stopped on the road. So he says, hey kids, what happened? They say, we're out of fuel, can you help us? He says, well, I can bring a tractor and tow you back to Russia if you want. Things like that. Um, and I think that day by day, this nonviolent resistance, it really destroys the whole purpose of the whole view that the Kremlin had when it started this invasion. They, they didn't have, they weren't gonna, conquer Ukraine and make it a Russian province. What they wanted is they wanted to change the leadership and put a leadership that they would be comfortable with in Ukraine. And even in the areas that they were able to, physically occupy, push out Ukrainian troops and civil defense units and so forth. And these are primarily Russian-speaking areas. A significant percent of the people there identify them ethnically as ethnic Russians. And even in these areas, they are constantly running into these cases of where, the people, they continue to operate and they simply ignore, okay, they have their governments, they live, the Ukrainian administration is still there and it's still functioning, which, it's funny because it was, that's, in a sense, the Russians wanted that because they were saying, no, we're not fighting against, the Ukrainian people, we're just fighting against the government. But then, when you fight and you are fighting all these bloody battles and you take over a certain town and you still have the same administration in charge. And so, what did you achieve? The question is, what did you achieve? Even in these areas that you, of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and what Russian policies will be in the areas that they physically more or less control today. But so far, there's this whole wave of nonviolent resistance that is just, behind the front lines of the military conflict itself. So we will see. We will see.
And then just one last question. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say get that information, spread it out. I think that can be very inspiring because it shows, how it's possible to resist a foreign occupation without military force.
Great. I think that's a great message to spread, and even for people who aren't involved or close nearby in Ukraine, Belarus, or Russia. I think that's a great way for them to participate. As a final question, during the United Nations talk, a statement was said that if Ukraine does not survive, international peace will not. I was wondering what you think as the global implications that this could say for democracy and peace if as this continues.
Well, I have no doubt that Ukraine will survive and that Ukraine will prevail because that's the will of the Ukrainian people. It's simple, If that's the will of the people, what can you do? So yes, people make statements, on international forums, and there's a truth to it. But I'm confident today, in long run, even if Russia's suddenly becomes successful, it hasn't been very successful so far. But even if they come and take control of the center of Kiev tomorrow, whatever. So what? Ukraine is a huge country. Well, a large country, not huge by, of course, compared to Russia or the United States, but it's larger than the state of Texas. And, Russia might bring in 3, 4, 500,000 police, troops, military. You still cannot control this whole territory. It won't be able to occupy the entire country of Ukraine. It doesn't have the forces for that. And more so, I am pretty sure that the pain, it's extremely painful. The people have been very close. They have relatives. They have friends. Many people lived in one country and then moved to the other. Many people come from mixed families. Very many Russians have relatives or in Ukraine and vice versa. And there's just no way that you can sell what's going on right now to the majority of the population. So far, the propaganda has been working and has been effective in fooling people and speaks about, this is all to protect the children of the Donbass and so forth and so on. It's greatly exaggerates, any faults of the Ukrainian government in the past years, or but still, you can't this can't go on for a long time, and the price for Russia itself is so high that it's just a matter of time, and I think it's a matter of weeks, not months, that the attitude in Russia will start changing very, very radically against this war. And it's just a question of time how long the government will be able to ignore the attitude of its own population toward this.
Thank you for listening to Andre's perspective and story. If you would like to support Andre and NVI as we continue to promote nonviolent direct action, please consider joining us and/or donating. Want to learn more about nonviolent tactics? Please look at our Nonviolence Tactics database in our training archive, both linked in the description. Only we together can create a more nonviolent, peaceful world. Thank you.